The waiter's hands trembled as he slid the folded bill across the table. Eyes lowered, voice barely a whisper. "I hope this doesn't offend you." Caitlin flipped it over, then froze. What he had written wasn't just a thank you. It was a confession, a heartbreak, a resurrection. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The diner had that particular kind of stillness you only find in places long forgotten by time. A hum of flickering lights, the wheeze of an ancient air conditioner fighting a losing battle, and a silence heavy with unspoken stories. Caitlin sat alone in a cracked vinyl booth, arms crossed, eyes scanning the chipped sugar dispenser and greasy laminated menu without really reading it. She didn't want food. She wanted distraction, or maybe just a corner of the world that didn't ask anything of her. Her phone buzzed again. Probably another message she wouldn't answer. She turned it face down. Ray shuffled over with a pad and pen that looked older than the building. "Coffee to start?" His voice was surprisingly gentle, fragile even. It didn't match the weathered lines on his face or the weary slump of his shoulders. Caitlin gave a tight nod. No words, just that. He brought the coffee minutes later, setting it down with both hands like it was something sacred. But he poured it too fast. The stream splashed over the rim, pooling on the table. His hand trembled, and a single drop landed on her sleeve. "Sorry," he said immediately, retreating a step. His posture collapsed in on itself, like someone bracing for scolding. Caitlin closed her eyes for half a second. Not out of anger, but exhaustion. "It's fine," she said, more to herself than to him. She noticed the way he stood there for a moment too long before wiping the spill with a thin rag. Not robotic, deliberate, as if every movement took thought, as if it mattered to him more than it should have. The meal came and went in quiet monotony. Pancakes, eggs, comfort food she didn't really taste. Ray returned now and then to refill the cup, never lingering, never intruding. Always with that same careful respect, like he thought the slightest misstep might make him vanish again. When the bill came, she hesitated. Something about the way he'd looked at her when she muttered earlier. Not angry, not hurt, just tired. It lingered in her chest. She pulled a crumpled $5 from her wallet and laid it flat. Then, almost as an afterthought, she flipped the check over and wrote, "Thank you. Hope your day gets better too." She didn't know why she added the second sentence. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was grace. Maybe, just maybe, it was the first time in days she'd seen someone more broken than herself. Ray approached the table slowly, clutching the rag he'd used all morning like it was an anchor. The remains of Caitlin's breakfast sat untouched. Half a pancake, a fork resting askew, coffee cooled to the point of bitterness. But he wasn't looking at the food. His eyes were on the check she'd left behind, folded in half and tucked beneath the salt shaker, a crisp $5 bill pressed beneath it like an afterthought. He reached for it with trembling fingers, more out of habit than expectation. Most left nothing. Some left change. The $5 caught him off guard. He paused. His hand hovered. A breath hitched in his chest. Ray glanced over his shoulder and saw Caitlin still sitting there, staring absently through the smeared diner window at the parking lot beyond, where the sky was threatening rain. She looked distant, but not cold, detached, but not cruel. And something about her, Something small, subtle, made him reach into the breast pocket of his worn flannel shirt and pull out a pen. He hesitated. Then he turned the check over and began to write, pressing the ballpoint harder than he needed to, as if making the words stick to the paper might make them stick to his soul as well. It wasn't rehearsed. He didn't stop to think. It poured out of him like a breath he hadn't realized he was holding for years. When he returned to her table, he placed the folded paper down with deliberate care, like it was something sacred. "I hope you won't be offended," he said gently, voice nearly lost in the clatter of dishes behind the counter. "Just wanted to say thank you, properly." Caitlin blinked, caught off guard. She picked up the bill and unfolded it, her brows knitting with mild confusion. Then her eyes moved over the handwriting. Her expression shifted in degrees. Confusion, pause, realization, and then silence. "You're the first person who's looked me in the eye all week. I used to run a business like yours, before cancer took my wife and debt took everything else. Today was my first day working again. That 5? That's more than money. That was dignity. Thank you." Her breath caught, sharp and immediate. Her fingers gripped the paper as if it might slip away. A quiet ache bloomed in her chest, not from guilt, but from recognition, from seeing, truly seeing, the weight this man carried so silently. He hadn't asked for anything, and yet, somehow, he'd given her more than anyone had in weeks. Her vision blurred. Perspective didn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it came folded in half, scribbled in fading ink, and delivered by a man in borrowed shoes. The sun had already dipped below the rooftops by the time Caitlin circled around to the back of the diner. The concrete behind the building was cracked, littered with gravel and the occasional cigarette butt, the kind of place meant to be unseen, like the people who came and went through its rear door. There, sitting alone on the curb, was Ray. His posture was relaxed but inward, the curve of his back folding him into himself. He held a white paper cup with both hands, sipping water as if it were something earned. Caitlin hesitated for a moment. This wasn't something she'd done before. Follow a stranger, seek out a conversation that wasn't about listings, closings, or negotiations. She didn't know what she would say. She only knew she needed to. "I read what you wrote," she said softly. Ray looked up slowly, startled at first, then ashamed. He averted his gaze, staring into the middle distance. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "That was probably inappropriate. I shouldn't have said so much." "No," she said, stepping closer. "It was real." That word settled in the air between them, like dust and light. Caitlin sat down beside him, not too close, but close enough to feel the warmth of his presence in the cooling night. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of a passing truck filled the silence, then faded into nothing. "I lost someone too," she said at last, her voice steady but low. "My mother, 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It happened fast. I was in the middle of trying to build my career, and I didn't see it coming. One day she was tired. 2 months later, she was gone." Ray didn't respond with platitudes or pity. He simply listened. And in that silence, the next morning broke with a calmness that felt earned. Caitlin stood in her kitchen, coffee in hand, staring at her phone with purpose instead of dread. The exhaustion that had hung over her like fog the day before was still there, but thinner, more manageable. edged by something she hadn't felt in days: direction. By 9 a.m., she was on the phone with Jordan, a friend who managed 2 restaurants downtown. Then Marla from the staffing agency. Then a few more calls, favors, questions, quiet asks. Most didn't lead anywhere, but 2 did. By noon, she had lined up interviews for Ray, one at a logistics company that needed a night shift supervisor, another with a local grocery chain looking for a stockroom lead. She drove back to the diner that afternoon, the same one with its flickering neon sign and worn-out booths. Ray was there again, wiping down tables, still moving with that same slow, deliberate rhythm. When she handed him the paper with the interview times and addresses, he blinked, like he hadn't heard right. His lips parted slightly, but no words came at first. Just a stunned kind of silence that held more weight than gratitude ever could. "Why would you do this?" he asked eventually, eyes glistening. Caitlin smiled, not with pride, but with something gentler, a knowing softness. "Because you wrote something real," she said, "and real deserves a second chance." They kept in touch after that, exchanging texts now and then, short calls. Ray got the warehouse job, steady hours, decent pay, and dignity sewn back into the seams of his life. 2 months later, he sent her a photo of a scruffy terrier mix he'd adopted from the shelter. "Meet Murphy," the caption read. "He snores louder than I do." Then one Friday, Caitlin returned home to find a plain white envelope in her mailbox. No name, just her address written in a neat, careful script. Inside was the diner bill, the same one she'd signed weeks ago, crinkled but clean, with her $5 tip still circled in faint ink. But now there was a second message, scribbled just beneath the first. "Turns out, $5 was enough to change a life. Because you saw me." The weight of it hit her all at once. Not like a blow, but like warmth after cold. The tears came quietly, falling over her smile. Not for guilt, not for pity, but for the rare, breathtaking clarity of knowing she had made a difference, not with grand gestures, not with money or power, but simply by looking, truly looking, at someone the world had stopped seeing.